SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Want to cut your heating costs this season? With a highly efficient York heating and air conditioning system, you can save up to 50% in energy costs while enjoying tax credits and TVA energy rebates as much as $3,000. Your local York dealer. Visit harbonair.com to schedule a free evaluation of your system.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Friday Eve.
Oh, yeah, man. Rolling up right on through the week we are. The heavy rains out of here, clear skies last night. Took Night, our black lab, for a walk, and it was just amazing. The moon and the stars visible after all that cloudiness and heavy rain we had the day before. So, cool stuff going through. So now, yesterday, Rhino, we had to kick the show off enjoying the smooth music of the great Al Green, the Reverend Al Green. Well, it turns out there's more news from Al Green, a different one, of course. So I think it's appropriate that we cue it up again.
I'm so in love with you. Whatever you want to do is all right with me, 'cause you make me feel so brand new.
Well, I believe it was the great Colonel Sherman T. Potter of MASH who said, "Not enough O's and smooth." To describe that. He, of course, was referring to, I think it was a bottle of Jack Daniels. That's what his folklore says, at least. When, I don't know if that's true or not, but as I recall the situation, he had a pact, right, with his buddies from WW1, and the last one of them to survive at the passing of all the others would crack open the cork and essentially remember the death of their buddies, and he did so, and that's what I believe he said. Not enough O's and smooth to describe this. Well, that's what you have to say about the Reverend Al Green's music and his vocals there. We, of course, are talking about Representative Al Green from the great state of Texas. The House lawmakers yesterday voted to censure Representative Green after he was booted out of the President Trump's address to a joint session of Congress on Tuesday night. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said, "Would the Sergeant of Arms please remove whatever the formal instructions are?"
It was brandy.
Okay, thank you. Brandy. All right. I knew it was folklore. That's a pretty good scene, though, you have to admit. That's one of the most memorable scenes of what I believe was the best all-time television series, MASH. I guess maybe it's just the era I'm from. But Al Green, the representative, his little childish escapades there with his cane. What the heck was that all about with a cane?
It's become his totem during this worrisome time for him and his cohort of loudmouthed midwits, because it seems like every time they have a presser out on the steps or they go out to a protest and get on the podium, he's there with his cane just gyrating with it in the air.
10 Democrats joined Republicans in voting for the censure, and several voted present, including Al Green himself. He voted present on the issue. 198 Democrats refused to support the censure. Of course, they're just like him. They're all eaten up with radical, inflammatory rhetoric. Their deep contempt for the president. And it was so great when he made that clear. There's nothing I can say or do that'll make you guys support me or like me or clap for me or what have you. He's absolutely right in that respect. But he's been officially censured, has Al Green. I guess other than just signing a piece of paper, that doesn't really mean a whole lot, right? I mean, there's no actions.
Not really, no.
Kind of a ticky mark on your resume. He'll probably use that to his advantage in that district.
His stoplight on the board isn't green anymore. It's on yellow. That's essentially what it is. It's the kindergarten equivalent of it.
Right. All right, so who's the purple hair? I don't know how else to refer to her. Congresswoman, I think from Connecticut. Lorio is her name, I believe.
Rosa DeLauro.
Yeah, DeLauro. Thank you.
Connecticut's 3rd district.
Okay, yeah. Well, she seemed to get a lot of visual airtime, during the speech. I guess because she's just so dang weird looking. I mean, you have to admit, I don't know how old she is, but she looks like she's got a few birthdays in the bank, and she's got that stupid purple hair with the green glasses. And how many times have you and I have said...
She just turned 82.
Oh, my gosh.
Happy belated birthday. It was March 2nd.
So...
She's been in office since 91.
I really try, and I know the left accuses us of this all the time, not to profile people. But if you saw her walking on the street, would you say, oh, there's a constitutional conservative right there?
No, I'd be surprised if they were.
Yes. And, well, last night, I don't know if you guys caught it, Gutfeld in his monologue. That's what made me think about Colonel Potter and MASH. Gutfeld in his monologue was just discussing, of course, the president's speech, and with lots of humor injected, as he always does. He's great at that. And he showed a photo of Representative DeLauro, Rosa DeLauro, and he said, who knew that Corporal Klinger was invited? That's so good. She does kind of resemble him. Oh, my gosh. Sans the purple hair, I guess.
Oh, I'm sure Klinger would have dyed his hair whatever color would have mattered to get him out.
That's
he was
so
just looking to get
funny.
out.
That's right. Whatever it takes to get back to Toledo, right? That was such a great part of the show and the theme. Really was the storyline. That was just so great. Looking for Section 8. Oh my gosh. And Potter would say, horse hockey, you're staying here where I need you. Oh my gosh. Remember when Potter came and all the officers were coming into his office one at a time to be introduced, and he had their files in front of him, and he goes through Major Margaret Houlihan, And he ends the conversation with her. Next up, Major Frank Burns. And so as he completes his questioning to Major Houlihan, he then just calls for Major Burns. He goes, Major Frank Burns. And she goes, just friends, sir. Remember that? Oh, it's so good. I'm sorry, I'm just digressing a little bit. Got to have a little fun in the midst of all of the political hoopla.
Always liked, what was his first name? Rizzo. The guy that went on to be the chief in police academy. Not the chief, the captain in police academy.
That's right, yeah. He was great. Oh, wait, when in the final episode, and he doesn't have any way to get Major Winchester out of there. Winchester said, I need an alternative mode of transportation. Rizzo says, this is the only mode we got. Whatever it was, a horse or a donkey or something. Well, let's see. Up next, I didn't bring my schedule in. I got to look it up. I think we got the Commissioner of Agriculture and Commerce, Andy Gipson, joining us. All right. And we've got Speaker of the House, Jason White. He's coming on at 12:05. A good day in store for you on Middays after we calm down, having a little fun. Whew. We'll be right back. Stay with us. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's do this.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Let's go.
This town ain't big, this town ain't small. It's a little of both, they say. Our ball club may be minor league, but at least it's triple A. We sit below the Marlboro Man, above the right field wall.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. We are live again in the Element Wealth Studio. We appreciate you joining us today. Our guest today is Andy Gipson. He is the Commissioner of the Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce. Commissioner, always good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Great to see you, Gerard. Enjoyed seeing you the other night at the Barn Burner.
Yes, sir.
In Rankin County.
Yes, sir. Awesome event. We certainly appreciate Representative Lance Varner, his wife Lacey, for serving as very gracious hosts and making their property available for what's just a slice of Americana, isn't it, Commissioner? When we just get together and have a good time, eat good food. You pointed out Mississippi raised food, products that are produced right here in the great state of Mississippi. Just talking some politics and stuff.
That's right. It's a great event. I do appreciate Lance and Lacey doing that. And yeah, we had some really good, genuine Mississippi chicken, fish, catfish. We had beef, and we had sausage. All of it made in Mississippi. So
man,
proud of that.
It was good too. I'm telling you, it was really good stuff. That was always fun. All right, so you've had a kind of an active legislative session, I think it's fair to say, from the perspective of your agency, the Department of Agriculture and Commerce, and it seems, Commissioner, front and center has been this issue of labeling various food products. Talk to us about that.
Well, this is an issue that's been percolating now for probably a decade or more. You've had these artificial products, you've had insect-based protein, you've had, other products that are claiming to be meat products. They're protein of some sort or nature, but they're claiming to be meat. They're claiming to be steak or tenderloins or any other cut of meat you might think of, bacon, and they're labeling it as that. And so people around the country have been, in a lot of cases, confused about it. But for us, I represent our farmers and the Department of Ag and Commerce, our farmers, our producers, our beef producers. It's a matter of importance that we make sure that customers out there aren't being misled by, some artificial product that's not meat or bacon or whatever the case may be, that they know what they're getting is real. And so labeling is important. I'll give you one example. This has become commonplace in the dairy industry. Now you have something called almond milk. Well, I would challenge anybody to milk an almond tree. You can't do that. All right. That war has already been fought and lost. It's gone so far down the road. But now, when it comes to meat products, and in Mississippi, chicken is our number one industry. Poultry is number one. It's our biggest industry, far and away, of any other industry in the state. Of course, our beef producers are always doing a great job. Catfish, fish is another. So the point of a lot of these bills is to make sure if it isn't meat, you can't call it meat. If it's not steak, you don't call it steak. And these bills, like House Bill 913, would give the Department of Ag a lot more authority to enforce these principles as we go from store to store and place to place doing our routine inspections.
602, HB 602, which of course deals with seafood and crawfish country of origin labeling. That sparked quite the firestorm on the Mississippi Gulf Coast within restaurants and suppliers of those seafood products. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, seafood, as you know, Mississippi Gulf Coast seafood is a brand of its own. And Gulf Coast seafood is something that we hold sacred here in our state and across the Southeast. So when we saw this misbranding and, these issues, some of it was intentional, some of it might not have been intentional, but there were distributors who were marketing product as Gulf Coast seafood when in fact it was a foreign import from Vietnam or from South America, and we have no idea how it was raised, and the safety aspects of it were in question and continue to be. So House Bill 602 is one of the bills that's passed, and we're working with the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. General Spraggins came and asked that if we would get on board and help support enforcement of this issue with them. They're an agency based on the Gulf Coast. We're, of course, statewide, so we want to help. We're 100% in favor of making sure that people know if they're buying real Gulf Coast seafood or some foreign import that they would not eat if they knew it were that. So we're on board with 602. It's passed both chambers. Both of these bills, all of these bills have, and they're in different stages of passage. But if this bill passes, we'll be conducting inspections and enforcement in the same kind of way that we do for our catfish. Years ago, it was a big deal, and it still is a big deal. People want to make sure they're buying U.S. farm-raised catfish versus Vietnamese-raised fish that is subpar and very unhealthy compared to U.S. farm-raised fish. So the same type concept applies. If you're selling Gulf Coast seafood, you're going to say you are, and then we'll make sure in our routine inspections, and DMR will, that it is, in fact, just that.
HB 1006, cultivate food products. What's that about?
That's about lab-grown meat. And, it sounds like a science fiction idea, but it is real. As a matter of fact, some of your big players like Kentucky Fried Chicken in other parts of the world have already been mass-producing this protein product cultivated off of cells, mass-produced. It's not farm-raised. It's not from an animal. It's created in a petri dish and marketed as chicken in other parts of the world. That is also coming here to America. So this particular bill would ban the production, would ban the sale or distribution of these products, these false lab-grown cultivated cell products in Mississippi. Florida, Ron DeSantis has done that, has led the charge on that. Other states like Georgia, Alabama are doing that, and in Mississippi, House Bill 1006 would do the same thing and would give us the authority to enforce that provision.
Okay. Let's talk about something that you mentioned the other night, and I know you've been a very outspoken on this matter, and that's the movement of the cell tower at the Eudora Welty Library in downtown Jackson to the state fairgrounds, which is under the purview of your department. It looks like that thing passed the House, as you know, but it got stalled in the Senate. Senator Bart Williams, I think, said, we're looking for more information from the city of Jackson, and they've yet to provide it.
Yeah, well, I can understand why they wouldn't provide it, because it was quite a sweetheart deal for Jackson As a matter of fact, I did a public records request on this cell tower, and I've gotten information on how much Jackson's being paid, who's paying it. It's several $1,000s a month. Now, this cell tower is located adjacent to the old Eudora Welty Library. The city did deed that library to the Department of Archives and History. But in the agreement that I have a copy of, they held back the cell tower location, and they made the state of Mississippi agree. I didn't sign it, and I wouldn't sign it, but they made that agency agree to pay the costs of tearing that tower down and building them a new tower at a new site, and to pay the cost of that site, and to build them a brand new tower, and Jackson would lose none of the thousands of dollars a month. And this bill, House Bill 994, that passed the House, would have given Jackson a 50-year lease on some very valuable fairgrounds property for the low, low price of $1. 50 years, $1. You do the math, that's 2 pennies a year. Now, that's highway robbery where I come from. And so I want to thank the chairman, Bart Williams. I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Hoseman for listening to our concerns. And, you know, I'm not against moving the tower at all, but I am against this kind of giveaway program that this was setting up. And I'm definitely against the state taxpayers of Mississippi paying for Jackson Cell Tower. That agreement, which is still in place, does not require the tower to be moved, but it says if it is ever moved, that agency, Archives and History, would pay all the costs. So, and then it says when it's moved, Jackson would deed the property under that cell tower for this park. So I know it'll be an ongoing discussion, but I'm glad the bill died. It should have died.
So it's my understanding that, is this true, Commissioner, that there's a donor who has has pledged some funding to, I guess, complete. I know the Clarion Ledger says that the building has been demolished. It's not. It's an eyesore, as you know. It's still standing. I really don't see any work going on to completely raise the building. But is that true? There's money available from a private entity or person? We got a break right here.
Well,
we can keep talking about it on the other side if you can stay with us.
I will, yeah.
Okay. We'll spend a couple of minutes cleaning that up. We appreciate you being on with us today, Commissioner Andy Gipson of the Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce.
Since Stitcher
is with Gerard Gibert.
It is on
SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We've got Ag Commissioner Andy Gipson joining us now in the second segment. So, Commissioner, before we went to break there, we were just talking about the cell tower. You said something about the fact that the city had already deeded this property. Is that right, to the state? Did I understand you right? Who is Archives and History that owns it now?
The city has deeded where the library sits to the state, to the Archives and History Department.
Okay.
If the city has held back the cell tower property on the condition that if it's ever moved, the state has to pay for it. Has to pay for all of it.
Okay.
Now, you said earlier that there's a foundation, a private foundation that wants to pay. That's a wonderful thing.
Okay.
I hope that they can do that. I'm not against that. Let them move it. But if you're going to move it to the state fairgrounds, they need to pay a fair market value and not rob the value of that very expensive property over here from the state of Mississippi. They were wanting to pay. That bill would have them to get a 50-year lease for $1.
Yeah,
now, that is unconscionable. That's wrong. And I knew if anybody could understand that was wrong, Delbert Hoseman could. So I talked with him about it, and he agreed. But you know, if they got private money to pay for it, why would they need to pass House Bill 994 to give the Archives and History Department the authority to pay for it and to do all that? There's more to this story than meets the eye. And I know a little bit more, but I actually have the documents in my office right here about that cell tower. It's a big, thick file. And there's a lot of history there. They're getting paid a lot of money. Jackson's getting paid a lot of money, and I'm fine with them getting paid money. It's on their property. As I understand it, they're fine with it staying there. But somebody thinks it's too ugly for the Archives and History Department, so they want to stick it down here on the fairgrounds where our farmers and 4-H kids and FFA kids come. I guess they think it's not too ugly for them.
Okay.
So I'm glad the bill died. And,
okay.
We'll work on it in the future. If they want to come talk to me, I'd be glad to talk to them. You know, I'm good about making deals. We'll be happy to talk to them. Maybe we can work something out, but it's going to be a better deal for the state than 50 years for $1. I can tell you that.
Yes, it's my understanding, and help me out here, that the plan is to tear down the existing structure, what's left of it. It's pretty dilapidated. It's the old Sears building is what I remember when I was a kid growing up. It was Sears retail store. And then they moved out, of course, and the library, which used to be in a building across the street, moved into that building, I believe, is what happened. Yeah. And the plan is to completely raise it and then erect a parking lot and some green space there to service 2 Mississippi museums. Is that correct, Commissioner?
That's my understanding. I think it's a wonderful idea. That's a great idea. That has nothing to do with this cell tower that's on Jackson City property that's only benefiting Jackson. And the agreement that they signed with Archives and History does not require it to be moved. It says it's preferable for it to be moved, but if it's ever moved, that agreement that Chuck Lumumba signed says that the state is going to pay 100% of the cost, and Jackson's going to be out nothing. And that's wrong. I wouldn't have signed that agreement, and I think it probably needs to be renegotiated. Maybe a new mayor could renegotiate a new agreement.
I just wonder why they deed this rather valuable piece of property under those conditions, under those terms and conditions. That doesn't make any sense. Seems like they hold the line or something on it a little bit more. I mean, it work out something that's in the best interest of all parties.
That's right. There's a way to structure it, and I've got some ideas on ways it can be structured, but that's none of my business. I had nothing to do with that agreement. Would never have signed that agreement. The only way I got involved was when they passed a bill to stick it on us and give Jackson a 50-year lease for 2 pennies per year.
Yeah, I got you. I mean, I
absolutely insane.
I rode by it yesterday afternoon en route to an event, and it's definitely an eyesore. And I think we have to be honest. That is an unusually large tower. I think it's because of its location. It's in demand by the wireless carriers to mount their antenna on that tower. And that is, I think you're aware of that. That's a fairly common arrangement where the telecom companies pay to lease space on those towers to typically municipalities. It's a source of revenue for them, and they're willing to pay it because otherwise they can't have cell phone service. It's a revenue generator for them. That's a really big tower. I mean, from a diameter perspective. From a height perspective, it's maybe 150, 200 feet, looks to me like something like that. You know, it doesn't just tower over. It doesn't need to, given where it is, because of the density of just traffic around there. Yeah.
And as you know, the fairgrounds is much lower. I mean, we're actually the lowest point in the city of Jackson here, over an old volcano. That's where the fairgrounds is. So it'd have to be taller. And when you have the largest events in the state with hundreds of thousands of people, there are concerns that I have about the safety of that and the big wind. I mean, we had some wind blow yesterday. These things do fall over, and that's why we have nothing to do with that deal. They should have left us out of it. If they wanted the fairgrounds to be involved, I would say come see me.
As you know, it passed overwhelmingly in the House. It was Representative Missy McGee's bill. Do you feel like, Commissioner, members of the House maybe just didn't understand all these nuances that you and I are discussing right now?
Yeah, I know for a fact they didn't understand because they've come to me and wish they had known. They would not have voted for it if they had known the facts. You know, I'm sure this probably isn't the last we've heard about the Jackson cell tower. I'm sure it may be discussed in the future. I know that there are people who want to move it. If there are private funds to move it, you don't need a bill from the legislature to do that, to pay for that. Get it done. And more power to them. But don't use the state taxpayers' money to finance something that only benefits Jackson, and in fact is going to cost the state revenue down the road. I love our legislature. I love working with them. They're good people. There's a lot happening at one time. As you know, there are thousands of bills. So things like this do get through without being fully thought out. And I think now we have some time to think it out better, and hopefully a better solution can be achieved.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't think you disagree that the plan would significantly improve that parcel right there, which is in the middle of our downtown, which is a huge eyesore. And if there's some way to get that thing out of here and completely tear it down and replace it with attractive landscaping and a parking lot to serve two Mississippi museums, that's needed and would be welcome. We just got to do something that makes sense for all parties.
That's it. That's right. Make a good deal instead of a one-sided deal. Well, we'll keep working with them, and these are some good bills. I do want to commend the House and the Senate for passing the very good agriculture and seafood bills that we talked about. I hope they will make it through the process. We're standing ready to enforce those acts should they become law. And I know there's a lot of other moving parts, a lot of tax discussion right now, a lot of other issues that are up in the air, and I wish our legislature the very best. I try to stay out of other issues when I can, but if we need to weigh in on something, I will. I will mention this. There is an important bill, the harvest permit bill that's out there. There's a harvest permit for our truckers that are carrying our ag products and other products across the road. That harvest permit gave a special weight limit for agricultural trucks and other commodities for commerce. And there's a bill out there to delete that repealer, and obviously I support that. It's being worked on both sides of the chamber. That's another ag-related bill. I didn't mention it in my release, but it's important because it does us no good to get products grown and raised if we can't ship them on the highways in an affordable way.
Commissioner, before we go here, have you received any feedback from Mississippi's farmers regarding the Trump tariffs that have been imposed?
Yeah, I mean, the feedback is today what it was 6 years ago, 7 years ago. That is, these tariffs, they are going to hurt. It's going to be painful. There are going to be products that will cost more that we're bringing in from other countries. But as I mentioned to another reporter yesterday or the day before, farmers are already hurting really bad. And I think what President Trump is doing, and they agree, he's trying to reset this trade deal that we have. We have an ag trade deficit Joe Biden put us in, where America is importing $45 billion more products from foreign countries, food products, than we are selling to other countries. That's a first. It's never happened. We're the breadbasket of the world. We feed ourselves and a lot of people around the world. Biden allowed this to get us a deficit situation. Trump is bringing these tariffs in place. Yes, they're going to be painful, but frankly, for U.S., Mexico, Canada, China, the United States, we have all the products for the most part we're bringing in from China, from Mexico, from Canada, so we can feed ourselves. This tariff war is going to give Trump the opportunity to reset the trade deal. And as we at the same time explore new markets, I'll be traveling to Panama with the Trump administration in April to look at some opportunities there to tap some new markets and to restore some markets that have been lost under the Biden administration.
Gotcha.
So there's a multi-pronged approach here. Tariffs are just part of it, but I think it'll give Trump the ability to reset all the trade deals that are out there for the benefit of our farmers, and that's what we're counting on. Gotcha.
Commissioner Andy Gipson of the Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce has been our guest. Always appreciate you coming on, Commissioner. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Good to see y'all.
You bet. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
As we say good.
Are we going to do this?
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Keep rolling. 3, 2, 1.
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. A little Huey Lewis in the news there. The market's all over the place, down today after being up yesterday, down the day before, and it's tariffs. It's not clear which way all this is going at this point. We've got the 25% tariff on goods from Mexico, specifically vehicles, where there was a pause put on that yesterday, and the market's like that, but it looks like the administration is set to also pause all other goods and services that are covered in the USMCA, the trade agreement that was negotiated with Canada and Mexico during the president's first term. So that at least is what Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick is signaling today. So sometime on, I guess it was Tuesday late, Rhino, he signaled, yeah, we put these tariffs in place, but we may actually have a deal worked out on the automobile tariffs to suspend those for at least 30 days. And then late yesterday, he announced, well, we might just go ahead and suspend the tariffs on all goods and services that are covered by the USMCA, the trade deal again struck between this country, Canada, and Mexico during the first term. And I don't think that's happened officially at this point. Just looking at the latest news, what do you see in there? Maybe it has. Maybe just a few minutes ago that it has. That they've suspended all tariffs on all goods that are included in that agreement from the first term, the USMCA.
Yeah, I'm looking at a video of CSNBC from 40 minutes ago. So, yeah, it's relatively breaking news.
Okay, but that's what happened, right? It's now this pause applies to all goods covered under the agreement.
Yeah, I just found the truth that Trump tweeted out.
Okay.
After speaking with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico, I have agreed that Mexico will not be required to pay tariffs on anything that falls under the USMCA agreement. This agreement is until April 2nd. I did this as an accommodation and out of respect for President Sheinbaum. Our relationship has been a very good one, and we are working hard together on the border, both in terms of stopping illegal aliens from entering the United States and likewise stopping fentanyl. Thank you to President Sheinbaum for your hard work and cooperation.
Okay. So, remember the famous movie Karate Kid? Mr. Miyagi?
Wax on.
Wax off. It's tariff on, tariff off. That's kind of where we are. But the reality is, it causes just angst on Wall Street. It just does, because you just don't know. Because all this says is, hey, we're gonna just pause it till April 2nd, less than a month. And so then they twiddle their thumbs and say, okay, what's going to happen April 2nd? What's going to happen? It's so. I certainly applaud the president's efforts to level the playing field and end the disparity with other nations with respect to trade. There's no doubt. I think he's right when he says that we've been taken advantage of, we've been fleeced for a long time. I completely agree. And he said in his speech the other night, he said, this will cause, the way he described it was a disturbance, but you'll be okay. You'll get through it. And you heard Commissioner Gibson say that I think Mississippi's farmers generally support those efforts. But remember, guys, last time, just so you recall, it did have, as the commissioner said, it did have a negative impact on Mississippi's farmers and American farmers with respect to making their goods more expensive because of the retaliatory tariffs when they export these foreign products to other nations, such as China. But remember what the federal government did in the first term is it provided, I want to say, $30 billion of subsidies to offset the decline in revenue associated with the tariffs directly to farmers in this country. So we subsidize farmers, taxpayer subsidies. Actually, keep in mind, we don't pay enough taxes to cover all of our outflows, so more than half of every dollar that goes out the window up there in Washington is borrowed. That's insane to think about, isn't it, Rhino? Think about if you ran your house that way.
I'm just over here looking. He mentioned Mexico. He didn't mention Canada. Does Canada get a reprieve, or is Trudeau not come to the table enough?
It does say on some Mexican imports. That's the news I'm seeing from the business media as of about 5 minutes ago.
Because USMCA is United States, Mexico, Canada.
Right. So, but what I'm seeing, you're right. It's very explicit. It's Mexico, except the vehicles from yesterday. Coming right back after Fox News, Super Talk News.
Hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher. And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transmission now.
Now on Super Talk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays, Super Talk Mississippi on this
Friday Eve.
On the C Spire text line, why isn't AOC censured for helping illegal immigrants evade ICE or better permanently removed? Well, I don't know that censuring would apply in that situation. I guess you could, but I don't.
If she had done it from the floor of the Congress, it would be censurable.
Generally speaking, it applies to behavior as part of the proceedings or
of your official duties.
Yeah, and I hear you. I mean, you see what could happen here, though. Right now, Republicans are in charge, and they could just go censure everything they don't like and everybody that did whatever they don't like. And then when the Democrats get back in charge, they spend all their time censoring Republicans, and our Congress would just be a big censure factory. But this was a blatant, and it was on display for the entire world to see on national, global television, honestly.
Well, that's part of the problem is you have about half of the conversation is made up of people that only saw the altercation in clips. So they only saw the expulsion. So they didn't see the warning, and then the second warning, and then the third warning. The dude was doing his dangdest to get kicked out.
That seems like it as well. That's really what his goal was to get booted. Because it called attention to himself, as you've said so many times. It got him all kinds of media attention. It's people that don't even know who he is. Now his face is all over the media. Man, oh man. The Dow now down 476. It's just not crazy about this uncertainty around tariffs. NASDAQ also giving up what ground it made up yesterday and then some, down 399. So I tell you guys, right now, and I would say for the next few weeks as we kind of get all this stuff sorted out, it probably isn't a good time to check the old 401k plans because I don't think you're going to like what you see. There's no doubt that the policies have started to kind of reset and reorient our international economic relations. It's talking specifically about tariffs, but there's more to come there, and like we said, the president said to us the other night that you just have to accept that to get things where they need to be, you're going to experience some, as he called it, disturbance. Now, I do have concerns that, unfortunately, we got to go back to the polls in November of 26. That's when we'll elect every member of the House of Representatives, every seat, and several in the Senate. How does this play out? Can we get the positive effects of this before then? Because if it's just a really out of control, downward spiraling stock market and inflation, higher prices of the goods and services Americans buy day in, day out, that's going to have a negative effect. Most people aren't paying attention and aren't willing to accept that, this is the pain we have to endure to get the trade back in balance. Because right now there's an imbalance, and I'm not talking about just imports versus exports, but tariffs. It's just the application of tariffs levied on American imports by these other countries versus the application of tariffs by this country on the goods and services they send in here. So that's going to be a bit unstable for a while, I think, is the way to put it. I know you guys aren't old enough to remember, but when I was younger, they censored John Bell Williams. He ended up coming home and running for governor. I kind of do remember that. He, I believe, a World War II veteran, as I recall, with one arm. I don't remember what he was censured for. Might have to let us know about that. Please tell me how and why an 88-year-old woman who has dementia who lives in a facility paid $3,000 in taxes last year. Why? Who are we talking about there? I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the tax returns. I looked to him to say he was going to let the reciprocal April 2nd go into effect. They set the price, we match. He did say that reciprocal tariffs are the strategy. That if whatever is charged on American goods by foreign nations, that we will reciprocate with similar charges here. From an inflationary perspective, some degree of good news. Crude oil trending downward. I think it's at its lowest point in quite some time. $65 a barrel. Seems like earlier in the year, Rhino, you and I were talking about $75, $76. So you should see the price at the pump come down here pretty soon. That's largely driven by what is starting to surface as economic conditions that aren't too great in China and the EU. In fact, the European Central Bank lowered its benchmark interest rate today in response to declining economic conditions across the EU. And the expectation is for a few more this year. I would not be surprised to see the EU tip into a recession here in the next quarter or so. And also, though expectations were that the U.S. Fed would not reduce the benchmark interest rate in this country a couple of weeks ago, that situation's totally changed now. And the folks that track all that and predict possible actions by the Fed now are placing the probability of a rate cut in the spring here, the May-June time frame. Not sure which month they meet in, can't remember. They're placing that at about 30%. That's up from 0 a couple of weeks ago. And that is being reflected in the bond markets, the 10-year Treasury down. In fact, the 30-year fixed rate now at 6.63%. That's a direct result of the decrease in the yield on the 10-year. That basically means that bond traders, investors, honestly, don't have a rosy outlook about GDP and overall economic performance, though profits are strong and gross margins are strong. If you look at first quarter reports across the Dow and the S&P. So the information is a bit conflicting. So many times we've shared with you on the show the old rather humorous adage that to be an economist you have to have two hands because you always end up providing an analysis, and then right behind that saying, well, on the other hand, and that's kind of what's happening here, if you think about it. Something the president said the other night, not sure if you guys picked up on it, but this is critical to the economy, and that is extending the immediate expensing of capital investments. I really can't describe how it's so-called bonus depreciation. What a valuable move and policy that would be. We had that in the original Trump tax cuts, but again, to make the numbers fit within the parameters of the reconciliation process, they had expiration dates on them, and they're being phased out right now, and that's a problem. In fact, I believe that policy totally ends in 2026. So what the president said in his speech the other night is that he wants to, of course, extend those and would prefer to make them permanent, as what he said. And this is big, and all it really means, totally expires in 26, 40% this year. In other words, if you buy a piece of equipment for $100,000, under the original provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, a small, mid-sized business or any business could deduct the entire cost in the year of purchase. You buy a piece of equipment for $40,000, you got net income in your company of $100,000, you get to deduct all $40,000 instead of waiting and depreciating it over the useful life as is prescribed by the IRS. And sometimes that's could be a couple of decades, depending on the class of asset. So you don't really get the full value of it because of the time value of money if you're having to depreciate it over an extended period of time. This is really good news. This, I believe, will do more to stimulate economic growth. CapEx is always a huge aspect because that's companies buying goods, in particular capital equipment, from other companies. So it drives profit and wages, job growth, economic activity, innovation, productivity, all the above. The Democrats hate this, by the way, Rhino. You know, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats hate this idea. You know why they hate it, of course? Because you might make more money. They hate you making more profit. Don't understand all the other positive aspects of that. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth Studio. Speaker of the House, Jason White, at 12:05.
Sometimes I...
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
awesome. On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Woo! Now, when I was a young boy, at the age of 5, my mother said I was gonna be the greatest man alive. But now I'm a man, way past 21. I want you to believe me, baby. I have lots of fun.
Oh, man, all these protesters. Are they just professional protesters? I know that's a rhetorical question, but...
Well, not as many, because USAID isn't funding them anymore.
Well, that's true. I don't know who's picking up the financial slack there.
Oh, Soros still has a dog in that hunt.
That's what I hear. Man, oh man. Well, they're calling for boycotts of Target because they're rolling back their DEI policies. And of course, they're protesting and honestly damaging, vandalizing Teslas and Tesla dealerships across the country. They're all mad at Elon Musk, right? Yeah, that'll fix it. Oh my gosh. Oh boy. This crypto heist intrigued me. $1.5 billion. Hackers that apparently came from the North Korean government. Maybe they're coming onto the scene, right, as a new cadre of nefarious hackers.
I wouldn't call it all that new. They're one of the world's most prolific state-sponsored hacking regimes.
They don't seem to have been as successful in their hacking exploits, I would say.
Not monetarily, no.
Right.
They have had several claimed successes in denial, or dedicated denial, or directed denial, whatever, DDoS attacks.
Yeah.
They've claimed to have gotten into certain non-secured entities within the government, but yeah, this is by far their largest monetary heist.
$1.5 billion from Ethereum. And it wasn't a terribly sophisticated scheme. The cryptocurrency exchange Bybit, B-Y-B-I-T, February 21st. I think it's Zhou, Z-H-U-O-U, the chief executive of Bybit. And he was just approving a routine transaction, a large amount of Ethereum from one account to another. And then he got a call from the CFO of Bybit, did the CEO, and it's described as delivering this message in a trembling voice. The chief financial officer, the CFO, told the CEO their system had been hacked. Quote, all of the Ethereum is gone. Man. Well, it turns out, and this leads me to another story in a second related to this, that they were relying on some rather unsophisticated, I believe, open source software, it turns out, Rhino, for some of the back-end cybersecurity, instead of much more sophisticated for-a-fee licensed software. Is that your understanding of what happened here? Okay.
And that's one of the inherent dangers of any open source software.
No doubt. And it's, by the way, it was storage related, a company called Safe. Okay, so who could forget, but last summer, Delta, Microsoft, CrowdStrike, shut down the dang air traffic across the country. We were up at the RNC trying to get back, recall? That it was the day after the RNC closed and adjourned that we're all trying to get home, and we ran into this problem at the airport there. It turns out that CrowdStrike wasn't the culprit. We've now learned Microsoft revealed in the last couple of days it was because the EU forced Microsoft to plug in some sort of open source software as part of their setup, their hub in the EU, and that took the whole dang system down. Instead of using, again, more powerful, more robust. Does this not just perfectly illustrate that you get what you pay for? The old adage. You could have fixed that to this situation as big as anything. And this is because, as you know, the EU has deep contempt for the fact that virtually all the high tech in the world, from a software and IT infrastructure perspective, comes from this country. It's all created here. It's designed here. For the most part, developed here and sold by American companies. They can't stand that. And they don't have an answer for it. They don't have a competitive answer for it. So they just issue all these stupid rules and regulations that make it so difficult to operate in their countries. I mean, imagine you're running an international business like a Microsoft, and you got to have one configuration and one flavor in this country, which is generally the best, because even with our regulatory environment, which we'd all like to see improved, it's still better than the EU's by a long shot. And you go to the Europe.
I mean, just think, when was the last time you dealt with an Ericsson phone or a
that's
Nokia
true.
phone?
Out of here.
Those companies still exist.
But you don't see
their
their
market
presence
share
here.
is minuscule compared to what it was decades ago.
In fact, it wasn't too long ago when we were in business. You know, we had a very thriving cybersecurity practice business. Nokia actually made some very sophisticated cybersecurity products that we used to market. In fact, our rep, this is kind of an interesting aside. I may have told this before. Our rep was a guy named Byron Tubb. If he's listening, I just said his name. He was out of Nashville. Guess who his grandfather was? Ernest Tubb, the famous country star, music star. First time I met him, he said, Tubb, Nashville. I said, are you related? Yeah, kind of deal. He was our Nokia rep. They're a Swedish company, I believe, right? And
I know Ericsson is.
I'm pretty sure Nokia is. Yeah, Nokia. I said it wrong.
Finnish.
Right. Finnish, okay. I knew it was somewhere over in that region. But where I'm going is that Europe has done everything they can to make it hard for America to compete and to sell their goods and services and to just operate. So they have something a lot of people, Rhino, probably aren't familiar with. I'm sure you are. The European General Data Protection Rules. They put into place 8-10 years ago. The GDPR is what it's called. And, of course, they maintain they're trying to protect you and the security and privacy of your data. All they did was make it outrageously expensive to operate in the EU relative to the revenue you can produce there. And it just costs money. So what we've learned about this whole Delta Airlines, and there was other airlines affected as well, but the interruption and all the systems that run the airlines, the major airlines, Delta, I want to say United was affected. We thought originally, well, this is a CrowdStrike problem, that there was some sort of penetration that got through those defenses. And it turns out Microsoft says, yeah, we finally traced the culprit to be our open source software that they make us use. Can't make anybody pay for it in the EU. And so they essentially had to lessen their standards to operate in the EU. Man, there's no wonder that the economy in the EU is teetering on recession. I think I've shared before, did you know in France there's laws that prohibit employers from emailing their employees after hours? And an employee, if they don't respond after hours, cannot suffer any repercussions from the employer. Hey, I sent you an email. It's pretty critical. I need you to respond. You can't do that in France. They're more concerned with your out-of-work time, your leisure time, than they are producing and working and creating value and solving problems. That's why they're broke. And that's why
that's one reason.
Well, there are a number of them, I agree, other than they've leaned.
When you have a super generous social...
I was going there. Yep. They have leaned into socialism big time. And the people in this country like Sanders and DeLauro and AOC and all these people we've been talking about, they all point to them as the utopia we should emulate. Yeah, we did that, and it took down the whole dang airline system in this country. It caused major pain, and by the way, that cost tens of billions of dollars of economic interruption. We're stepping aside for a break. Stay with us.
Now,
Touring fans, it's time for
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
I never meant to be so bad to you. One thing I said that I would never do. A look from you and I would fall from grace, and that would wipe the smile right from my face.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is currently conducting an interview with Fox Business's Larry Kudlow at the Economic Club of New York. The markets must not like what he's saying because they continue to trend downward. The Dow now down 535, and the NASDAQ 437. He says the focus is on getting the 10-year yield down to make mortgages and financing more expensive. However, the 10-year's up while he's talking. So I'm not sure what he's saying there. Yeah, Nokia is on the C Spire text line. Nokia is heavily into telecom network transport equipment supply business after buying Alcatel-Lucent. Supplies a lot of SFP modules. Those are usually the little interfaces used to connect fiber optics. And circuit boards used by carriers to provide IP internet fiber to the home. And also, by the way, Texter, just to support telecom transmission overall. They've been doing that a long time, by the way. It's not anything new. Even before they bought Alcatel-Lucent, which used to be a subsidiary, I believe, of AT&T and was in that business. But they also make consumer products like we were talking about. But certainly the carrier industry, the telecom carrier industry, has always been a big customer for the company. But I think Rhino's right. They don't seem to be a major player in the consumer electronics business.
Because the overburdensome regulations of European nations tend to get in the way of innovation.
Yeah. A Kyocera flip phone. Arg. So I get to shop at Target again? I've been boycotting them for years because of their men and women's restroom policy, says Amanda from Pike County. You know, I know this comes up a lot, and I certainly respect anybody in their decision-making with respect to how they spend their money and who they choose to spend it with. I think that in some instances, companies' policies and values are just more understood and more publicized than others. If your goal is to find one that fully aligns with your values, you ain't. I just put it that way. But
I don't shop at Target, but it's not because of politics. It's because everything in there is higher than everywhere else except Walgreens.
I agree with you. It does seem to be. It's hard to figure out where they fit, though they're pretty successful.
Yeah.
And even after all the boycotts announced, you remember Netflix wasn't too long ago. Everybody was boycotting Netflix because the CEO...
Feels like that's a biennial thing where they do something stupid or release something controversial and some group gets upset and boycott Netflix. And it trends for a while and then 6 to 18 months later the cycle completes again.
Less. Actually, it was the CEO that gave $1 million to Kamala, remember? And everybody on the right said, okay, we're done with that. And then
Before
the next
that,
quarter...
it was the Cuties show with the underage dancing, and
I may have a little different perspective of this than people, and I don't mind sharing that. That, man, if I relied on only people who shared my values to be customers, I'd be bankrupt. My suggestion is to companies, don't venture into political matters like this. Don't be social activists. Target, what I remember about Target was that they were the first out with all the transgender clothing for children. Remember that, Rhino? Weren't they the first ones that had like special bathing suits and crap like that for young people, transgender young people? And had a big department and a bunch of signage and, a big celebration about it, the virtue signaling crap. Just sell stuff and quit being a social justice activist. I think that's what people mainly get put out about. And it's not just them. That swept the entire country. It's being rolled back quite a bit. It's Facebook and their tampons in the boys' bathroom, right? The men's bathrooms. Now they're not doing that anymore. You've seen a lot of that stuff rescinded, which is, I think, good news because, again, you're not social justice activists. Just be the best at whatever good or service it is that you provide to society and let them choose on that basis other than your social activist and your value system. It's just so dumb. Let's see. Must not be Linux. Well, not necessarily. Linux is hackable as well. And it's subject to cybersecurity attacks and interruptions.
Well, anything's hackable. It's just, is it going to be worth your time to learn a specialized skill set to hack something like Linux or Apple or
Yeah. Target went out of its way to virtue signal. It's a choice. We all have to choose. I totally agree. And so I'm not being critical of anybody for making their choice. Amanda talked about it, and I totally respect her opinion there. But I would ask that they respect mine. My opinion is I don't factor that into my buying decisions. That's just me. And I guess it's rooted in the fact that for being a business owner for so many years and scratching for every dime, I couldn't worry about whether or not we didn't align politically with our customers. We just didn't talk about it. We just did business. And I'm hoping we're returning to that sort of dynamic in our economy.
Well, yeah, I too share that hope and that dream that society will again realize there are certain things you talk about with your friends, there are certain things you talk about in public, and society's a whole lot better off if you can differentiate between the two.
I agree. Somebody said I think Target was also the first to stop saying Christmas and had holiday trees and such. Yeah, I mean that. I think you'd be shocked to find out a lot of companies that people shop at that wouldn't if they knew the whole story. I think they'd be shocked to find out just how woke they are. Now, the other night the president said, "What woke is dead, no more woke," or something like that. And there's no doubt that the tide has turned on that. I think it ran its course. It kind of had its period of popularity, and everybody was trying to hold my beer, outdo each other with stupider things, honestly. And it does feel like that there's been a relaxation of all that nonsense, and we better worry about business and not that kind of crap. Again, you're not social justice activists. Just make stuff, sell stuff, produce stuff, and we'll all be better off. So the Treasury Secretary is saying the longer we wait on extending tax cuts, something we've said on this program many, many times, the greater the chances are that taxes will increase. Completely agree. I think that people aren't paying enough attention to that. The one big, beautiful bill to do that, the $4.5 trillion of tax cut framework included therein, is what the U.S. House is working on right now. I totally agree with the President's Treasury Secretary that needs to be front and center. Let's get that done now. Let's see there. It has cost him. It has not. Target, I'm sorry. Go look at Target's financial performance. It's quite strong. It has not cost them. That's the whole point. In Netflix, Rhino, after they gave $1 million. Remember that to Kamala Harris? Next quarter, big time increase in sales and profit.
Yeah, the only time they seem to take a hit on anything as far as their bottom line is when they make bonehead decisions like, oh, we're going to raise the price of the one that's already supported with ads.
Yeah. Probably the move that did, in fact, provide or induce an economic deleterious effect.
Password sharing.
Oh,
when they cracked down on the password sharing.
That's what changed it for Netflix.
Everybody thought, like this is just an example is what I'm bringing up.
Yeah.
Everybody thought with the password sharing crackdown, oh, that's going to kill their bottom line. Oh, it's going to be the end of Netflix. You're just wait and see. People aren't going to put up with that. And what happened? Their numbers went through the roof because people that had been password sharing were like, okay, I can pay $10 a month because I really want to see the end of this.
Yeah.
And that's the way it works with these boycotts. Unless you get a big enough group of people to get angry enough to completely change their habits, it never works.
It's now rated as one of the best stocks to invest in. Netflix is. So I think the reality is anytime this sort of boycotting stuff starts, it's such a smidgen of possible customers. The absolute vast majority of people just really don't care. And they don't factor that into their buying decisions. I will say there's one exception to that, in my view. That's Bud Light. That one cost them. But that's because
they got a big enough group of people.
That's right.
To change their habit.
But 99%, I would say, of their customers, Bud Light's customers, which is maybe a little bit more similar, the type of customer that consumes Bud Light, And what they did in using this transgender person to promote their product just doesn't appeal like whatsoever to the vast majority of their customers. That was the worst move of all right there. That was the most expensive woke mistake ever. That did cost Bud Light big time. Cost them market share, cost them revenue and profit. They're still reeling from it and trying to get back on their feet. But that was so boneheaded because of all the people you would get to promote your product to your primary customer profile. That's the worst you could have ever chosen. No doubt. That's a little different than targeting the bathroom stuff. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Come on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Where do we go from here now that all of the children are growing up? And how do we spend our lives if there's no one to lend us a hand?
That's from the All Hit request line there. Appreciate that, Rhino. On the C-Spire text line, someone says that Netflix password sharing still works. You're supposed to set a primary location, I believe. And, of course, you can share within that location, household accounts, as they call it, the same household. But if you're outside the household, I think there's a charge. Like $7 a month. It kind of
depends. If you are utilizing mobile data, there's really no way to prove that you're not a member of the primary residence or primary household.
Okay.
If the device spends, it's all internal numbers. They've tried to game it out and figure out exactly what it is. But there's a certain amount of time where if that device, whatever that device is, whether it's a phone, a tablet, a laptop, whatever, spends time on the same IP address as the home, then it doesn't even really worry about it at that point.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's they got backlash from the media, so they kind of tweaked it. But yeah, it's possible. It's not as easy as it once was.
I'll say this: if you're violating the terms of their agreement of use, and you're not a paying user, you're stealing. Guys, that's just the bottom line. You may think you're entitled to it and that you're smart and wise, and I'm not saying anybody's doing that. I'm just saying in general, you know it happens, and it happens a lot. You're stealing. This is their line of business. They're providing you a service, and you're not paying for it. You're not entitled to it. That's stealing.
No, I think it's more like, hey, I give you a certain amount per month to use 4 screens. Well, if I'm using 3 and my kid or cousin or whatever that lives down the road is using theirs, that's still 4 screens. Still getting what I paid for.
That's not what the terms of the agreement are, though. You're still.
But nobody reads the terms and conditions.
I understand, but you're violating a contract. But it goes way beyond staying within the 4. I mean, I understand your point, your argument.
And they have now put in place where if you go above your screen limit, they'll start slowing down your speeds and cutting off screens, and yeah.
Right. Well, that's like saying before software transitioned to be more subscription-based and you had to actually purchase a license for software and you got the media for that it would be
key.
Right. When that became common, but before that, it was just copied. We had customers that do it, big customers, high-profile customers, and I literally had to write letters to them just advising them, you're violating your license agreements here, and I'm warning you that you're subject to an audit. You agree to that, and they come in and find out, wait, you got 1,000 people here using stuff you hadn't bought but 500 licenses, and they send you a bill. I've seen it happen. You either pay it or you go to court, and you will be compelled to pay. And they could also make the decision to cease to do business with you. And the court order, I've seen this happen, you deinstall all that software so that you can't use it. So I don't really have any sympathy for that. It's taking money away from the people who are in the business of selling software. You may not like it. You may not like the price they charge. Well, then don't buy it. But don't steal it. That's just how I feel about that. I get a little bummed out about that. I was kind of surprised to find there's, again, high-profile large corporations doing that. That's not right. It's not good.
And then you got the opposite problem in the federal government that we found through Doge, where, there's 13 people in this office. We'll take 1,500 licenses to use that software, please.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I'd like to see the rest of it. I'm not doubting that, because when you looked at the list of software they had, where they found more licenses than you, like there's project management software. You think that was individual licensed? That wasn't subscription based? Now, I could get it if you're subscribing to a number of concurrent. So sometimes software subscriptions are number of concurrent users. Sometimes it's number of machines. One of them, Rhino, they reported was WinZip. That's a per machine license. You know what I bet happened? They retired some old equipment that had licenses on it that they paid for one time, okay, but they were still paying support for those licenses that were on machines that had already been recycled. That absolutely happens. You don't deactivate it and reclaim the license and all that sort of stuff. Now, no doubt, that's gross mismanagement and incompetence. And I know you're shocked to find out that may have been going on in the halls of the federal agencies. Oh, my gosh. Jailbroke Fire Stick, never pay for any service again. Huh. Interesting. CC in Senatobia says Bud Light was basically country boy beer, so advertising with a tranny made as much sense as Burger King promoting Big Macs. I agree. That was just totally miscalculated and misguided. Pretty funny. Fox News, Super Talk News, and then Speaker of the House, Jason White.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on Super Talk, Mississippi.
Winter is here again, oh Lord. Haven't been home in a year or more. I hope she holds on a little longer. Send a letter on a
Welcome back, everyone. Hour 3 of Middays is now with you live from the Element Well studio on this
Friday Eve.
It's our good pleasure to welcome now the Speaker of the House of Representatives of the great state of Mississippi, Speaker Jason White. Thanks for coming in, Mr. Speaker.
Good to be with you, Gerard, on this beautiful March day.
Yeah, and it was good to see you the other night. What a great event that was, held by your colleague, as you referred to him, Representative Lance Varner from Rankin County. He and his wife, Lacey, were kind enough to provide their property and serve as our hosts for a fantastic event.
It was a great, laid-back, informal, political barn burner.
That's what it was.
As it was styled, and it was truly under his barn on his farm, and it was fun. Lots of local politics there, folks running for local offices, and hearing from us other folks that have something to say in the political world. It was fun.
That was good. Yeah, enjoyed
and it was
that.
some really good food, too.
Yeah. Okay, so let's turn our attention to some legislation that's going on. The top of your list, of course, has been your priority for the session, which is HB 1, that the measure that passed the House would fully eliminate the income tax and has some other tax provisions in it as well. The Senate doesn't seem to be too keen, I think it's one way to put it, on the measure. The Senate has a competing bill, and my understanding is leadership's kind of working behind the scenes trying to see what they can get done.
Yes, sir, and working hard. I'm very encouraged by the last few days. we'll see what happens over the next few. But everybody has engaged, so I want to thank Senate leadership for that, and we've come several miles in just the last day or two. So
okay.
I think all of that is incredibly positive for this debate and this idea, if you will, and ultimately the winners are going to be Mississippians. I think certainly we never held House Bill 1 up to be a perfect solution or a perfect piece of legislation, because that one probably doesn't exist anywhere. And so, the Senate obviously was more cautious in their approach, and certainly, for whatever reasons, didn't want to go as far as the House did. So somewhere in the middle of that, I think a lot of smart people from both the House and Senate spent a lot of time working on this, finally digging into the numbers, and agreeing when you get all the political rhetoric out of the room and sit down and really look at the numbers, most reasonable folks agree there is a way to do it. It's probably a little more conservative or slower than people might want, but it's probably the prudent thing to do. And I've said from the get-go, long as we can all agree that we're going to that same goal right over here, which is total elimination, and really set us up for future, economic development, attractiveness from so many different, standard of living and that sort of thing. As long as we all agree that's where we're going and that's the goal of this legislation, not some future legislation, but this legislation, we're on board and we're ready. No part of our House Bill 1 is off the table for being amended, changed, done away with, that sort of thing. So those guys and girls in the Senate have done a bunch of work looking at it, looking at the numbers, and we're encouraged. I think our chairmen that are over those respective committees in the House and Senate are meeting again as we speak right now.
Is it fair to say, Mr. Speaker, that anything that they should hammer out that stops short of full elimination of the income tax is a deal killer from your perspective?
I think it's a deal. It would probably be a deal killer for the House, but more so, that's been the governor's stated goal. And let me say this too: he has engaged in this process probably like no other. Not that he hadn't been engaged his first 4 years as governor, but he has really engaged in this process. So, however you feel about Tate Reeves and our governor on this issue, he has engaged, he's gotten into the numbers and into the policy, and nobody questions his conservative bona fides when it comes to looking at the numbers and figuring out tax policy and finance and what's best for our economy, because I think, proof is in the pudding what all has happened under his watch. And for better or worse, governors get the bad press when bad things happen, and they get the acclaim when good things happen. And under his watch, we've had a lot of big wins. This would be a huge one for our state, and certainly, people said this be part of his legacy. I think certainly it would be. But he has engaged and helped kind of move these talks along, and so he deserves a lot of credit for keeping this idea at the forefront. And I'm encouraged by his participation and the fact that he shares the same goal with the House, which is total elimination. So I do think that's going to be part of the final solution. And I'm a glass half full guy anyway. I've told you that before. But this one is looking better by the minute.
Okay. Well, in my discussions with Senate leadership, I don't feel like that they're necessarily opposed to full elimination of the income tax. I don't think that would be a fair assessment. But they are concerned about sufficient revenue coming into the state to cover what could be significant increases in expenses necessitated by, for example, the Medicaid program. And now the president says he wants to abolish the Department of Education. I don't think he can do that with the executive order, but he'll probably try, like all presidents do, that it would require legislation. But it's quite possible that would go through it. $280 billion comes from the Federal Department of Education. The state of Mississippi, as you well know, receives a significant amount of federal funds in that realm. If we were to lose that, if we get cuts in Medicaid, which even though the president said he's not going to do, the Speaker of the House says he's instructed his team as they draft the details around the budget framework, does include cuts to Medicaid, that could affect the state of Mississippi. You know where I'm going with this. We're looking at possible natural increases in expenses and spending as a result of losing some federal funding.
Well, you call those natural increases. you'd fit in well down there at the Capitol, Gerard. At some point, one of our duties, obviously, as legislators, is to make a budget and spend the taxpayers' money on core functions of government.
Right.
This sort of course correction on a federal level, there's no denying it's going to make us as a state, and not just us, but every state. And some say, oh, well, we're more dependent than others. Maybe we are. But regardless, everybody will feel that if it happens. And so I think it may be more measured than some folks think. But whatever happens, because it would take some legislative at some point to get there. And those folks are probably a little more cautious and patient than the president is. And that's the way the system's designed. But it might force us to have real conversations about, should we be spending this money on that, whatever that is? Because when you're flush, like we've been the last several years, things tend to get funded. It's a whole lot easier to fund something than it is to say, wait a minute, tell your friends no. You hear our governor talk about that a lot, that he's able to do that. Everybody should be able to do that if they're going to run for office and serve in the legislature. And so that type of action on the federal level would force us, tax cuts or not, to decide, is this worth increasing the budget for, or is it not? And I think that's tough conversations. Okay. We should earn our money down there at the Capitol, and not just the answer always be, well, we've got the money, let's spend it. We probably should come back and actually look at these programs. I heard Michael Watson on early this morning. He was in the Senate before he became our Secretary of State, and he made a valid point. When are we going to talk about fiscal restraint and holding the budget down instead of, hey, we've got all this revenue, what is the new shiny thing we can spend it on? And we're all guilty of that. But it's time to have real conversations about it, especially if you're talking out of the other side of your mouth about tax cuts. We can fund core functions of government. We'll deal with whatever federal issues as they trickle down, as all states will. We've got a unique opportunity. We are setting aside way more than we spend the last several years. It's time to have those real conversations, and I'm encouraged. We're close.
Okay. Well, the state auditor, as you well know, he really promotes the idea of sifting out some of the wasteful spending, and something he said a couple of days ago is that we're spending a lot more on vehicles and fuel as compared to other states like Arkansas, just travel in general. I mean, is there maybe an idea or a plan, Mr. Speaker, from in your chamber or in both, that to kind of stand up some sort of group outside of just the state auditor to study this?
There's a lot of talk about that. And right. You may see our peer committee, which is a joint committee of House and Senate made up of what I would consider some of our best budget hawks and folks that really want to dig into those kind of details. You may see them pivot and turn a little more toward exactly that going forward, probably as soon as this summer when they reconvene and get to meeting again. I want to tell you about some things we've done in this budget this year that starts us down that road when we come back. If we have time.
Sounds good. Speaker of the House Jason White is our guest in the Element Wealth studio. Coming right back.
Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. We've got Speaker of the House Jason White joining us, and All right, so you want to talk about the budget. This is a big deal. Of course, we are sitting last year, right, just over $7 billion for fiscal year 25 in terms of outlays, but we were scheduled to Sine Die estimates of revenue 7.6, something in that range.
7.677. Yeah. I think it'll hit closer to 7.7 after this February report came in.
Okay,
we were almost right on our target number, which is just shy of 7.7. So we're going to be somewhere there on a budget that's less than 7.1. So we're going to bank in excess of $500 million again this year. Now, looking at what we would call the 26 budget, the budget we're crafting now that will go into effect July 1st. My appropriations committee in the House has done an outstanding job of, all right, y'all, we're talking about reforming the way we collect taxes and what are the revenue streams that are going to fund state government. And now we're going to talk about spending. And last year we felt like with the new funding formula that was fully funded, and by the way, in this budget I'm fixing to talk about, it is fully funded again this year, including the PERS and health insurance increases throughout state government, wherever they are. But the House has crafted a budget that is almost dead level year over year from last year. Now, one of the things that we did to get there, you were talking about Doge, and does that sort of movement have a place in Mississippi? I think it does. Mm-hmm. And I think our appropriators in the House took a really good first step this year and even to some extent the whole committee of the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. We eliminated almost 1,500 PINs. Those are positions in state government that go unfilled. In agencies, they include those in their budget requests so that the money's there.
They say hire somebody for that.
Or in case we spend it on something else.
Yeah.
And so what we've done is go through and tried to, scour the bushes and we've been able to come up with over 1,400 positions that we can eliminate and free that money up and stop that. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, even with a little bit of inflation, we're holding the budget almost level year over year. We're going to come in with a budget right at 7.1, maybe just shy of 7.1. And on a $7 billion budget, if it only grows by just a few $1 million and is basically dead level, I think the final numbers I saw last night from House Action, the budget would increase 0.31% this year, and that would fund everything, including the health insurance increases and the PERS increases.
I'm a little surprised, because the rate's going up in 0.5% increments over 5 years, the employer side of the rate, so that falls on. And
health insurance and the health plan for our inmates. Don't forget, we got popped for, because when they come into the custody of the state, even if they're a Medicaid recipient, they come off of Medicaid and they are 100% our wards of the state, if you will. We pay for everything. Yeah. And so that was a huge hit as well. But even absorbing all of that by really going through the budget, and so I have to commend my chairman, John Reed from Jackson County, chairman of appropriations, and his vice chairman, Angela Cockerham, and the 4 chairmen that serve with him on appropriations B, C, D, and E. Those being Chairman Bounds, Chairman Mims, Chairman Oliver, and Chairman Clay DeWeese. They have done an excellent job and worked late into the night trying to craft that budget. So I'm proud of that. I look forward to landing that plane hopefully this week. We passed our last appropriations bills this morning in the House. We are done from that standpoint. There may be something that the Senate wants to quibble about. If we're still there, we'll do it. If we're not, we have level funded a budget that is, I would say, got everybody where they need to be as an agency.
Well, it's good to hear. I'm a little surprised that you were able to keep the increase down to such a small amount, given my expectation that Medicaid was going to need more money. Again, just because of the cost of health care, not Medicaid expansion, not loss of federal money. That's still not understood where that's going at this point, right. But just again, just the organic sort of increases.
Well, a couple of things. We received an enhanced match for several years during the pandemic. So Medicaid, there was kind of a cash reserve sitting there.
Okay.
And they've been spending down that cash reserve in a way that we hadn't had to just drastically increase the state spend yet as far as recurring budget expenses. Now, that day's probably coming, or some tough conversations are coming, probably as soon as next year. But for now,
fair enough.
We're there. Now, again, who knows what that picture looks like as our friends in federal government figure out the best path forward for those programs. But there's been no pushback from the standpoint of folks are glad that things are holding steady and we're keeping the cost of doing business as a state government down. Okay. Nobody's fussing about that. Now, there may be weeping and gnashing of teeth when President Trump and his folks get through, but we'll deal with it. This is what American people, this is what Mississippians wanted, and I think it's a good and healthy thing, and hey, we're going to be there and we're going to figure it out. It's what we say we want in limited government and only core functions. We need to let our actions speak volumes on that, and that brings me, we're talking about federal involvement and the impact of those federal elections, House and Senate now in conservative control, as well as the White House under President Trump's leadership. You mentioned in our first segment about education, abolishing the U.S. Department of Education, and either cutting funds or whatever federal funds will come with some strings attached, if you will. But in this case, the president has signaled that those strings attached are going to look like what I would call more freedom and parental choice when it comes to the education of their children. And we've seen the federal mandates come in ways that we didn't like under an Obama administration or under a Biden administration. Let's see some mandates come down. Presidential elections do have consequences. I enjoyed when one of the president's staff gave the press folks at a presser in the White House a lesson on civics and how it works. The president gets elected, he has a say in these things. And he has said, I want to see more freedom in the education world and less government involvement in what we're doing with our money.
Why aren't we getting that message here, Mr. Speaker?
Well, that's what I'm telling you.
You're into the hall, we are.
This state voted overwhelmingly for President Trump. The people of our state supported that in a huge way. You can go to any rally you want to, and everybody's wearing way more Trump shirts than they are Jason White shirts or Delbert Hosemann or anybody else. And we should be able to be a part of this national movement when it comes to our parents being in control of their child's education. And again, some kind of way through the years, this has gotten, the conversation has gotten morphed into, if you're for this, then you're against public schools. And that is just not true. The House passed meaningful, measured, I would call them baby steps on this front this year. And all of that legislation found its way to slow and quiet deaths in the Senate without even so much as a vote, debate, hearing, anything. And, it's one thing to say you're for something. At some point, leaders in the Senate, including in the Lieutenant Governor's office, have to either be for it or against it. And unfortunately, their actions show that they are against it. That is in direct opposition to the direction our new president's leading our country. And I just think it's unfortunate for Mississippians that at this point, that message has fallen on deaf ears on the other end of the building, and parents will wait another year for education freedom, it looks like.
And our surrounding states have been busy enacting robust school choice legislation.
And for us, that is always a key indicator, whether we're talking about income tax or gaming or any of these different health care. We look, what's Louisiana and Arkansas and Tennessee and Alabama doing? What are they doing? They are on the front. They're leading on these issues, and we are some kind of way, one more time wanting to be the last one to jump in the pool. It's time, and right now, while we've got the stars are lined up with the way our leadership is, we should be able to take advantage of that and find, if not bold action, at least some measured approaches to finally open it up for our parents. Because after all, and folks tend to forget this, even when they send their tax money to Jackson, it's still their money. It's not our money. It's not the House's money. It's not the Senate's money. And it's not MDE's money. It is taxpayers' money, no matter where it sits. And for that reason, they should have a say in how it's spent, including on education.
In response to the president's announcement of his desire to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education, the state auditor has indicated his support for eliminating the State Department of Education. Does that make sense to you?
I think it makes sense on a lot of fronts. Now, what that looks like and where we go, I'm open to that discussion.
Okay.
But it can't be. It can't look like some sort of entrenchment organization that is simply here to stand in the way of the direction that taxpayers want to go. At some point, government should reflect the will of the people.
Can you stay and share your thoughts on district consolidation?
Sure.
Yeah, we got Speaker of the House Jason White in the Element Wealth studio.
Get on! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We are back in the Element Wealth Studio. Speaker of the House, Jason White. So before we went to break there, Speaker, we were talking about education choice, the difficulty we're having, just taking the baby steps as you described it. And in this case, it was just Representative Jansen Owen's legislation that survived the House, got transmitted to the Senate. That's one of maybe two major bills. I don't know if I'd call them major, but those that survived and made their way down the hall there would just have created a open enrollment portability. Any student in any school can apply, and if accepted for enrollment to any other school within some reasonable parameters of capacity and so forth, allowing every district to determine their capacity. Just required them to report that to the legislature, so they don't kind of play the game with that, and also set up some funding to cover the local portion of a student's funding cost should they transfer, because their local funding would stay in their home district. So accommodated all what I thought would be the objections, but we couldn't get that off the ground in the Senate. We couldn't get even any amendments to it. Like, I thought maybe they'd say, okay, well, let's restrict this to D and F districts, and we only have 3 now.
Correct.
So that's not a whole lot of options. But we couldn't get anything going.
We couldn't get anything going, and I'll have to let those folks answer for their actions. I wish I could explain it to you. I hate to say this, but I've heard the lieutenant governor say when he's asked those pointed questions, whether it's in an interview on this show or other shows, or I saw an in-depth interview he did with Russ Latino a few weeks ago. He was asked that specific question on portability, and multiple times he said, "Oh yes." And as a matter of fact, the Senate will pass portability, and as if it was in doubt in the House. Well, you can't keep saying those things and do something else. And so that I've got to answer for my politics, and he does, and Senate does, and House members do, and that's fine. But you can't keep saying it, and then when it comes time, to actually perform, not do it. And
he said the same thing, by the way, on this show, but he did include the caveat that only the D and F districts, the failing districts as he described them, but we couldn't even get that.
Well, I've heard it said without caveats, but regardless, we didn't even get that. The bill didn't even get
we didn't get that.
It didn't even get a hearing, and so at some point, you probably got to say that, Nancy Loom's one of the most important members of the state Senate.
No doubt.
You can't. It's hard to look past that. And look, again, those guys seem to survive just fine with it. So
yeah. Okay. All right. So we were talking a little bit about consolidation of school districts. I think originally your plan was to require it, right? And then you kind of changed the final measure there to study it, I guess.
Well, we had some conversations with the folks at MDE, and they indicated, maybe there's a path forward there that maybe, even they, like us, would like to see something in that space.
Okay.
So here's what our original legislation said. It basically gave them 4 or 5 years. You go figure out how you want this to look. All we're saying is we're putting in law that we will go from 134 5-school districts down to 82 by X date. And I think we put it out 4 years or 5 years.
Okay.
Go figure it out and come back to the legislature with what that looks like. If we need to hold your hand and pass more legislation to make it happen, that's what we'll do. All right. Obviously, it was great resentment and detractors on that issue. So eventually all that got watered all the way down to simply a study committee on let's appoint school leaders, legislators, all sorts of folks, parents. Let's get a working group appointed by the legislature and let everybody have a say in who gets to sit at that table and let them go morph and come up with the plan. We couldn't even get that, which means we can't even get a conversation on public record that's for the world to see on the issue, at least to just hear. Like that's the frustrating thing with the ESA cleanup bill, the charter cleanup bill, our portability bill, our Tim Tebow Act that would allow homeschool students to play sports in their local school district and participate in extracurricular activities where their parents pay taxes, I might add. Mm-hmm. We couldn't even get hearings on those in the Senate where at least hear what the objections are. Maybe the objections are valid. Let's just hear what they are. It's tough to have. You need to have a dance. You got to have a dance partner, and right now we don't have one.
So we spend more money on education than any other category of spending.
Yes, sir.
And that's fairly typical in the states. It's 55%, I think, something like that.
If you include IHL, that's correct.
Yep. All right. So, is there anything that's going to come out of education? Because everything I see just died in education committee. So,
well, the bad old Republicans are going to fully fund the new student funding formula that we call Inspire. They're going to fully fund it in a way that everybody was mighty happy with last year. So the same people that had that idea have these other ideas, and I don't know how you square them all.
All right.
We're frustrated, but hey, we're going to work on that's process was designed in this way, and we're going to work within the bounds of it and see where we get.
There's concerns that because you're so focused and have prioritized HB1, that is making it difficult for legislation transmitted from the Senate to get out of committees and onto the floor in the House. What do you say to that?
It's just not true. I made a point when we adjourned for the day today at lunch to remind our colleagues and our folks on the other end of the building that we went in there this morning and passed a Ways and Means agenda, an appropriations agenda, and almost half of the general bills that came from the Senate, many of which were double referred. I think even one was triple referred. And guess what? They got out of their committees. They had a lot of eyes on them. Some were amended. Some are going to the governor as of today. When we voted for them, they weren't amended at all. So it can happen. I called it an early Easter miracle, and I hope that miracle pops up on the other end of the building, because that's where the bills seem to be bogged down, is on the other end. But folks have blamed their bills dying on the focus on House Bill 1. That's just not true. We passed a major education agenda in the House this year. We passed some major health care reform with CON, and I don't call them scope of practice. I call practicing within your trained profession, as we did with nurse practitioners. And again, those bills
died in the Senate.
They die quiet death down there again.
All right, so
it's frustrating because we spend a lot of time educating and talking about it, trying to get it right and answer the questions that people have on it. And then, again, we need a dance partner.
You may choose not to answer this question, but I'm going to ask you anyhow. Do you think if we had different committee chairmen on education, gaming, and House, there would be a different result of legislation your chamber passes?
It's a valid question. Here's what I would say. We have major chairmen in the House who are passionate about the places where they happen to chair those committees. And so it doesn't take a lot of my office, the Speaker's office. I don't have to call them in and say, are you ready to go charging off?
I think I misspoke. I meant in the Senate.
Yep. I knew what you meant.
Okay, I apologize for that.
We've got a lot of self-starters in the House that are passionate where they happen to be.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, that may not be the same in the Senate. Maybe chairmen aren't where they want to be. I don't know that.
Let's be honest. But Senator DeBar does not favor any form of school choice.
He doesn't.
Senator Blunt opposes mobile sports betting.
Well, but I'm just
Senator Bryan doesn't want to repeal CON laws.
The one power over all powers that both the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor have are appointing chairmen.
Right.
And I just say, when I hear somebody say, well, I don't know about that, my chairman's not for that. I'm for it, but my chairman's not for it. How long do you think I'd get to sit in the Speaker's office if everything was just willy-nilly based on what a chairman thought on any particular day? But I think that goes back to when you appoint them in the first place. You got to put people in your business. When you were running a multi-million-dollar business and employing hundreds of people, you put your folks where you thought they had the most value and made the most impact at your business. I think you got to do that. Now, certainly, I've heard folks say, well, you go to war with the army you got, not the one you want. But you got to hire them. Our voters send them there. It is a key component of my job as Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor's in his position to appoint key folks who are passionate and reflect the will of Mississippians in the way legislation ebbs and flows through the process.
Okay. Well, I'll accept that answer. I'll just provide my opinion that I think the outcome would be different if we had different people.
I think it would be different, but I can't give a pass to the guy at the very top.
I get it.
I think it starts at the top and a priority set. Somebody's got to be the tip of the spear, and I think it actually starts at the very top.
And as you so accurately articulated, we elect that person.
You elect that person.
And that's what their job is.
You brought up chairman of gaming. It looks like, again, this year that the Senate is going to stand in the way of mobile sports. Folks will continue to illegally gamble and bet on sports online, and that money will go elsewhere or in illegal dealers' pockets instead of through the normal channels where our gaming industry and our gaming officials could regulate it, and we would at least see the benefit of our operators making that money and Mississippians making it versus it hitting on the illegal market. Because folks are betting, make no mistake about it.
There's happening. $25-50 million a year.
And almost every operator supports mobile sports betting through their casinos.
I've been in the gallery and I've heard them say it, the management of those organizations.
Yes, sir. It's time.
Speaker of the House, Jason White, has been our guest. Thank you for coming in,
Mr.
Fun. Speaker. Yeah,
Thank you for the opportunity.
Enjoy it. Coming right back.
Middays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. Thanks so much for joining us. So, really appreciate Speaker of the House, guys, to spend quality time with us here in the studio, stay 3 segments, and it's just good of him to do so in an unrushed fashion and share his thoughts and analysis and provide updates, vision. We're fortunate, really are, and I don't take that for granted whatsoever. You may disagree with some of the things that he or any of the other elected leaders say when they come on the show, but the fact is, when they come here, that means that they don't have a problem getting in front of a large audience, public audience in the state, and we should be grateful for that. Now, I personally believe it's part of their duty, and I think they see it as that way as well, but as Rhino can attest, there's some elected people that don't think that that's part of their duty and are unwilling to come in. And this is not a confrontational environment whatsoever, and it's just not our style. It's not what we do here. We're trying to get information and perspective.
But in the absence of information, in the vacuum left by certain people's unwillingness to even discuss it with us, well, that gives us the chance to come up with our own ideas as to why they make the decisions they make, and they have the opportunity to clear it up if they would just like to come on the air.
Direct communications is the way to avoid those vacuums. And by the way, it's not just in politics, it's business, it's life. If you ignore it, you don't communicate, honestly, you should be initiating the communication to avoid the vacuums which occur. And then all sorts of crazy stuff gets spread around that's likely not true, but because, well, you won't tell us. And this is our conclusion, right or wrong, on the basis of that. So, and there was a lot to unpack in that interview, guys. We went through really the spectrum. Maybe one of the big wins we're having this session, Rhino, we didn't talk about because I almost feel like it's old news now, and that's the direct shipment of wine. That was a pretty major accomplishment. And I say that because, dang, how many years we've been trying to get that done? It's a lot. So I'm frustrated, like a lot of people are, with the lack of accomplishment and progress on the school choice front. We've got a president who fully supports it, a Department of Education. And in fact, Betsy DeVos, his education secretary in the first go-round, fully supported it. We have one now, and Linda McMahon, who does. We've got the president talking about, hey, the reason I want to get rid of the Department of Education at the federal level is to return education management and administration to the states. consistent with the framework of our country. It all shouldn't come out of Washington. Huh?
It's in the name.
Exactly.
United States of America.
Right. And so that just makes total sense. Was that not the essence of the Dobbs case, overturning Roe v. Wade, when the Supreme Court said, you got over your skis, talking to the Supreme Court of 1972 that ruled on the Roe v. Wade decision, said, no, you got it wrong. This is a matter for the states, not the federal government. Forget the moral aspect of it. I'm not downplaying that. I'm just saying, but because honestly, the Supreme Court, that's not what they're charged with doing. They're charged with interpreting the law. And they said, yeah, you got that wrong. And I honestly believe that the creation of the Department of Education at the federal level was a mistake. And now we have a president who's speaking seriously about abolishing it, who even said the other night, I hired Linda McMahon so she can hurry up and put herself out of a job. And she's parroted that instruction. You've heard her say it. And I said it, I think, yesterday. How refreshing to have a cabinet secretary who says, I'm just here for the short term. I don't need all these spoils and all this attention and to sit there on the chamber floor during State of the Union addresses. No, I'm here to get rid of this department.
How dare her not spend more than most Mississippians will ever see in their lifetime on renovating and remodeling her office.
That's right.
That's literally the mindset of the Democrats. How dare her?
That is so true, because they worship government. That's just the bottom line. Oh, gosh, let's see. I'm so glad the Speaker called Delbert out. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for standing up for Mississippi Republicans, says Bubba in Starkville. Got to do like Barney says, nip it. Glad to know there's no hot-button issues not being addressed. I agree. Appreciate that. I think we covered it. Great show today, Gerard. Any updates on certificate of need law changes, Greg and Madison? Yeah, we just went through it. They all died in the Senate Public Health and Welfare Committee. What we had was legislation that came out of the House that would have rolled back the CON requirement for a variety of health care services. You know what else it would have done, Rhino? Increase the CapEx threshold. So right now, I don't remember what the number is, but if it's over that amount, you got to get permission from the Department of Health, even if you want to build more parking spaces. That's how asinine that is. And this would have at least, I think, doubled that amount. That seems like a no-brainer. Nope. Senator Hobbride in the Senate says no go. A Democrat, of course. We're out of here today. Thanks so much for joining us. Back with you tomorrow. Stay safe and God bless everyone.
Mid-Delta Auction is holding 2 March auctions, a spring equipment auction Thursday, March the 20th in Greenwood, plus a retirement auction at Ewing Farm in Anguilla on Thursday, March the 13th. Visit mdauction.com for details on both. That's mdauction.com. We'll see you there.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.